I'm Matt Pinfield. Today's guest is arguably one of the best singers in recent rock history. From his beginnings with Soundgarden, through his years with Audioslave, and once again as a solo artist on his latest album, Carry On, Sound Off is proud to bring you Chris Cornell. Chris, welcome to Sound Off. It's great to see you again, man.
It's great to see you.
Really happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I want you to know that I will not do any more interviewing from this moment on unless you promise that I get to walk away with one of these guitars.
Absolutely. You get one. Actually, you're going to develop one yourself, aren't you?
They're all yours, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
I didn't know you jammed.
I've been collecting them, Chris, for quite a few years now. I just lend them to Gibson, to tell you the truth.
No, this is like some sort of crazy showroom.
It is. It's incredible here at Gibson. Chris, tell me about growing up in Seattle. You were born there in that area, right?
Yeah. I don't know. It was sort of normal, I suppose. You know, it kind of removed from the rest of the country in a way, but just sort of, you know, a normal place to grow up at the time. I think kind of geographically isolated, it created an environment, you know, musically, certainly that was different. When I became a musician, the tone in Seattle, in terms of like bands performing live, was this kind of really bad commercial new wave Tommy Two-Tone kind of thing.
Yeah.
And those were the bands that played everywhere. And
Soundgarden.
Soundgarden.
Were you a young teen at the time?
Yeah, I was a young teen, and when I started playing in bands, I was in a lot of bands as a drummer that essentially were kind of playing that circuit, and so it took me a while, maybe about 3-4 years of doing that before I started to bump into people that were part of another scene.
So tell me about, and then so that period, I know that. The next thing up was Down on the Upside that you guys ended up doing, and that ended up being the last Soundgarden album. What was the recording process and the feeling of making that record?
That was like my favorite. I think it was the most challenging because we produced it and mixed it, which meant for me personally, I was there. You know, I was the first guy there. I was the last guy to leave. I was sitting behind the console. I was, you know, it's difficult for any band, no matter how well they get along, to make decisions about recording a record all together and have that sound cohesive. You know, naturally, everyone's concerns are going to be different. When you have different concerns and you're trying to field them all at the same time, it makes it hard. But we did it. And the thing that was great about it was that was the only record Soundgarden made where every member of the band was there all day, every day.
Yeah, when the breakup came down, it was obviously, I was sad about it, but I knew you'd continue to do some other things. What would you say were the parting reasons?
There's an all silver guitar I got my eye on right back there.
Yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But at that point, you were just like, it was just time at that point.
Yeah, you know, the only way I can put it is, which I've mentioned before, is that we had a meeting like a couple weeks after we split up that involved just making some decisions business-wise about how to end. And everyone seemed really happy. And it was almost like a weight off our shoulders. I think we were all sort of shouldering what we felt like was the burden of championing a band that was just somehow important to music and important to the people who were fans of it.
Yeah.
And we were terrified of doing something wrong. I feel like we just we were still had it up, and we found a shelf to put it on, like, so it'll stay there.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
Let's go.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then it was kind of like that. You know,
Yeah.
I felt like we did it. We didn't mess it up.
And you didn't, and it's great. And,
yeah.
then Euphoria Morning came, which was a really great record too. Did you enjoy the process of making that record? You ended up working with the folks from 11 on that?
Yeah, I really, you know, part of it was terrifying because it was my first solo record, and personally I was going through a really dark period. But musically, was taking huge strides, either forward or one direction or another.
Yeah.
Doing things I'd never done before. Working with 11 too was almost like going to music school because their abilities technically and just naturally was just like on such a high level.
Now, Chris, so the new album, which is called Carry On, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you did this one with Steve Lillywhite. And
yeah.
Were you a fan of the other work that Steve had done in the past? He's been a guest on the show too here. And
yeah, you know, I was a fan of records that he did, and I didn't even know he produced them. I've never been a guy that really thought so much in terms of who produced a record, and I have friends who are musicians who know names of famous producers and what records they made, and I'm not that guy.
Speaking of the new one, there's a lot of stand-up bass on there, and they're stripped-down instruments, and you wanted to have a more really organic feel on this record. And Carry On.
That was one of the first things, really, I think Steve was responsible for, was coming up with the attitude that at least the basic tracks could be recorded acoustically, everything. And part of that, I think, is the theory that if the song works on that level, anything else is kind of a bonus.
Chris, thanks so much for coming by. It was great to have you.
Thank you.
And always good to hang with you.